This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Global leaders emphasize the need for cooperation to fight the pandemic and climate change. The African Union warns about the possibility of delayed COVID-19 vaccines as richer nations hoard the precious jabs. And the White House says it will take a multilateral approach in its engagement with China. Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also coming up this hour. In business, Nigeria keeps its monetary policy rate at 11.5% to boost consumer spending. And in sports, athletes across the globe already receiving vaccines in preparation for the Olympic Games. In our top story this hour, we start in Ghana, where former President Jerry John Rawlings is being buried today after a state funeral. The ceremony, originally planned for 23rd December last year, was postponed at the request of his family. Rawlings ousted the Ghanaian government in 1979 and then took power in a second military coup in 1981, leading the country for 11 years. He was elected democratically in 1992 and again in 1997 before retiring in 2001. Our correspondent Nabil Ahmed Rufai joins us now from Accra. Of course, he's following the events of this farewell. Nabil, thank you so much for your time today. Just bring us up to speed with what's happening there.
Well, Lindy, it's a solemn atmosphere here at the Independence Square in Accra, where the final funeral rites of the former President Jerry John Rawlings is being held. The ceremony started over an hour ago, and we have dignitaries from all over attending this funeral. We have the President of Liberia, George Weah, attending. We also have delegation from Guinea-Bissau, Nigeria, and other African countries also attending this all-important funeral. We also have delegation from the ECOWAS Commission and the African Union all grazing this occasion. Just gone by was the biography read of the former president, read by one of his family members. We are also expecting his wife, former First Lady Juman Rawlings, to pay a tribute to him here, as well as his children. You know, he left behind 4 children, 3 daughters and a son. We also expect the President, Nana Akufo-Addo, to pay tribute to these former presidents of Ghana, Jerry John Rawlings. Now, this ceremony is going to be a very brief one because of the whole coronavirus pandemic, and there's been heavy restrictions here. Unlike other state funerals where you expect the general public to attend, this has been largely restricted to just a few people. And after the ceremony here, the corpse or the casket of the late former president will be lifted from this premises, and then there will be a procession from here to his final resting place, which would be the military cemetery at Bema Camp here in Accra. So for now, the ceremony is ongoing, and it's indeed quite a sad day for Ghana as one of its former presidents is being laid to rest today.
Nabil Ahmed Rufai, thank you so much, joining us there live from Accra, from the state funeral of Jerry John Rawlings. Now, more than a year since the coronavirus first emerged, we've hit another grim milestone. The number of cases around the world has now passed 100 million, with over 2.1 million deaths. The United States remains the hardest hit nation with 25 million infections and a death toll of over 423,000. India has the second most cases with nearly 11 million, but Brazil has the world's second highest death toll with 217,000 deaths. Now, the World Economic Forum is underway, and leaders are highlighting the importance of global cooperation in the fight against the pandemic.
Ça veut dire qu'on ne peut rien reconstruire I think this means that we can't rebuild anything, in my opinion, in the post-COVID world, without drawing lessons from two fundamental elements. Economy has once again become a moral science, and nothing is above human value. And our societies are vulnerable. Nature reminds us of that. They are vulnerable to pandemic, climate, and other events.
Fort de ces enseignements, mais de ce qu'on avait aussi avant, de ce qu'on savait.
Und das ist natürlich ein Punkt, der uns in den letzten Jahren immer wieder beschäftigt hat.
It has become even clearer to me than it was before that we need to choose a multilateral approach, that a self-isolating approach won't solve our problems.
Ansatz uns nicht dabei helfen wird, die Probleme.
Now, the gathering is being held virtually this year, and that, of course, is because of the coronavirus. It is day 3 of Davos, and world leaders are talking about various global concerns, such as clean energy and a sustainable bioeconomy. We will, of course, keep an eye on events there on day 3 of the Davos agenda. Well, the call for cooperation when it comes to vaccines comes as Africa expresses concern about the hoarding of vaccines by richer nations. Let's bring in Bharat Pakania, a senior clinical lecturer at the University of Exeter Medical School, joining us live now via Skype from Bath in the UK. Bharat, thank you so much for your time. Now, the call for cooperation when it comes to fighting the pandemic has been a constant refrain since this time last year, but it seems that nations are not heeding the call as expected. Would you say at this point self-interest would trump unity?
It is wrong to have that wrong self-interest, because it is in our own self-interest to look after planet Earth, because the whole world is our family, as ancient scripts in Sanskrit say, Vasudevai Kutumbam, which means the whole world is my family. And if you refuse to act as if the whole world is your family, you are not being fair, and you're not only that, but you're creating problems. So give you an example. If one country is fully immunized and the rest of the world is not immunized, then you have the emergence of different strains, different variants, different problems, which will also come and affect the country that was fully immunized. And therefore it is better for the richer nations. They are all gathering in Davos today to say we are going to increase capacity for manufacture of these vaccines, and we are going to share them equally with all parts of the world. This is a very important thing to do for politicians to do it right.
An important thing to do, and one that should certainly be done, particularly on behalf of those less fortunate regions of the world, Africa among them. But do you really think that African leaders can get a resolution, a commitment at the Davos Forum for a more equitable distribution of vaccines?
It is imperative that the African leaders don't leave Davos and pin the Western leaders down and force them to agree that they are going to share the vaccines for the good of humanity. It is a really important thing. And if they refuse to do so, they are only causing problems for themselves later on, because what happens in Africa will happen in Europe. And this is an important message for the African leaders to say to the European and the American leaders, that if you don't look after us, we will not be able to look after you.
And of course, there are a lot of concerns about new COVID-19 variants emerging. One of the responses to this has been a number of travel bans around the world. Do you think this is the most effective way to respond to new variants?
No, we have to have multi-layered approaches, and the multi-layered approaches is suppress infections in all countries, and that is supply the vaccines, supply other countries with PPE and advice and logistics, as well as monitor the emergence of new viruses. And then, of course, you also have restrictions on movements, but you just can't have restrictions on movements as the solution. The solution has to be multifaceted.
Thank you so much. Bharat Pakania joining us there from Bath in the UK, sharing some very poignant and meaningful insights there on the COVID-19 vaccines. Now, as we've heard, there are concerns that African countries could see delays in receiving those COVID-19 shots. On top of disruptions to vaccine production, the African Union has in fact accused richer nations of hoarding vaccines. The AU has been urging member states to work together rather than acquire vaccines individually. Here's CGTN's Girum Chala with more.
The African Union has engaged multiple manufacturers in efforts to secure COVID-19 vaccines. Africa is already eyeing 270 million doses expected to come through an AU agreement. However, limited provision of vaccines, delays and hoarding could pose challenge to secure access. The Africa CDC says chance of acquiring vaccines will be much higher if AU member states can work together rather than strike individual deals.
We've met with nearly all vaccine manufacturers and have dialogue with them, and some of them are ongoing, and we'll continue to engage with them and bring the results to you all. I think we really want to make a strong appeal to the continent that going alone will not help the individual cause for the country, but we need to do it collectively.
So far, none of the Western vaccines have been administered in Africa. It's been almost 2 months since initial doses were rolled out in parts of Europe. Deliveries were not made to Africa, largely due to heavy demand from other parts of the world. The Africa CDC say, though challenging, herd immunity must be achieved as soon as possible. This would prevent COVID-19 from becoming a frequently occurring disease.
We, as a continent of 1.2 billion people, have been saying that unless and until we strive to vaccinate at least 60% of our population, will definitely end up having COVID on the continent as an endemic disease again. And Africa has already enough endemic diseases that we don't need COVID to install and become disruptive and continue to challenge our health systems in the manner that other diseases have challenged that clearly.
Through the AU's continental COVID-19 vaccine strategy, Africa is set to acquire at least 270 million doses. According to AU officials, the work of financing and the plan of equitable distribution is going well. The question many now ask is, how soon can the majority of African states start vaccinating their citizens? Girum Chala, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Now turning to China-U.S. relations, the White House says it's starting with patience in its approach to China. Press Secretary Jen Psaki says Washington will take a multilateral approach to engaging with Beijing and review some of Trump's hardline policies, including evaluating tariffs currently in place. China's foreign ministry says the two nations have extensive common interests and that cooperation benefits both countries. Beijing says it hopes Biden can adopt positive and constructive policies towards China and push relations back on track. Well, China's ambassador to the United States says future ties depend on whether Washington can respect that China has a different model of development.
As for China-U.S. relations, there are various opinions in the United States, and many countries in the world are also paying attention to us. If we look forward, a healthy and stable development of relations between China and the U.S. is needed. There is a fundamental question for the U.S. to answer. China and the U.S. have different histories, cultures, and social systems. Can these two countries live in peace with each other, focus on cooperation, and manage their differences in the 21st century to deliver greater benefits to the people of our countries? For the U.S., it depends on whether it can accept the development of a country which is so different from itself, and whether it can respect the Chinese people's right to pursue a better life. I am sure a solution can be found in our relations if there is a clear, unambiguous, and a positive answer to this fundamental question.
Tunisia's parliament has approved a cabinet reshuffle. Prime Minister Hichem Mechichi named 11 new ministers that he said he hopes will bring in fresh blood into Parliament. President Kais Saied has criticized the move, stating that the absence of women in the new lineup is of concern. He also said that the reshuffle has not been examined by the Council of Ministers, as the Constitution demands. A wave of nighttime clashes between demonstrators and security forces has now turned into daytime riots called for by activist groups in the country. The trial of an ex-leader of the Allied Democratic Forces rebel group, Jamil Mkulu, and 37 of his fighters has started in the Ugandan capital, Kampala. The court session is taking place via video link from the Luzira Maximum Prison, where Mkulu has been held since 2015 when he was arrested. Isabel Nakiria reports.
The Allied Democratic Forces, or ADF rebel leader Jamil Mkulu and his group are accused of launching a rebellion and terrorizing people in western Uganda before relocating to eastern DR Congo. The group denies any link to the rebellion. They are charged with terrorism, murder, aggravated robbery, aiding and abetting terrorism, and crimes against humanity. Mkulu has been detained since he was arrested in Tanzania in 2015 and extradited to Uganda. The crimes are alleged to have been committed between 2011 and 2015 across the country. Prosecution also alleges the group were involved in the murder of several Muslim clerics in Uganda. The ADF is accused of killing hundreds in eastern DRC and leaving thousands homeless. It's also been blamed for attack on UN bases in eastern DRC and killing of peacekeepers. It started with the aim of overthrowing President Museveni's government and has also been linked to the Al-Qaeda militant group. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Let's take a short break now. Here's what's still ahead on the program. The UN says nearly 180,000 people may need assistance in Mozambique after cyclone Eloise. And Nigeria's president fires military chiefs as insecurity rises. Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climate and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories. Let's have a look. We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Algeria,
Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice. To Mozambique now. In the aftermath of Cyclone Eloise, thousands of people have been displaced and many children are likely to contract waterborne diseases. The UN Children's Agency says that more than 176,000 people, over half of whom are children, may be in need of humanitarian assistance. CGTN's Joy Kirukijuma has the details.
The powerful storm that hit central Mozambique has left in its wake a trail of destruction. Initial reports indicate that 6 people were killed in Mozambique and 8,400 people lost their homes. 26 health centers and 85 classrooms were also destroyed.
I'm here because of the floods and Cyclone Eloise. I lost many things. My house collapsed. I don't have a house anymore. I lost all my furniture. In this tent, we are 10 women, all with children. I want to be in a place where it doesn't flood, where they build us better houses, at least to recover some of our furniture, plates, blankets, something to eat. We couldn't save anything from our houses.
This is the second severe storm to hit the country in less than a month. Mozambique is prone to severe cyclones, drought, and flooding. The country is also dealing with insecurity in the north and central regions. The conflict has displaced over 500,000 people. These challenges, compounded with the coronavirus pandemic, leaves families struggling to recover. Joy Kirukijuma, CGTN.
Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari has sacked the country's military chiefs who he appointed upon assuming office in 2015. And this comes as the nation continues to deal with a range of insecurity challenges, from insurgency, kidnappings to armed robberies. CGTN's Phil Ihaza reports from the capital, Abuja.
The presidency confirmed the replacement of the service chiefs through the special advisor on media and publicity, Femi Adesina. No reason was given for the sacking of the heads of the Army, Navy, Air Force and Chief of Defense Staff, but President Buhari thanked the outgoing service chiefs, adding that their achievements have been overwhelming, especially towards maintaining peace and tackling insecurity across the country. Adesina says President Muhammadu Buhari congratulates the new service chiefs and urges them to be loyal and dedicated in their discharge of their responsibilities. The new service chiefs are Major General Leo Irabo, appointed as Chief of Defense Staff, Major General I. Atahiru, appointed as Chief of Army Staff, Rear Admiral A.Z. Gambo, appointed as Chief of Naval Staff, and Air Vice Marshal I.O. Amao, appointed as Chief of Air Staff. Nigeria has been dealing with widespread insecurity, including more than 10 years of insurgency and rampant kidnappings. Since the president assumed office 5 years ago, this is the first time he's changing his heads of military despite pressure from security experts and critics. Buhari has continued to pledge that his administration will do its best to halt the activities of insurgents and criminals across the country before the end of his tenure in 2023. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
The recently appointed head of the UN support mission in Libya, Jan Kubish, is set to take up his role next month. He replaces Stephanie Williams, who started the mediation process to end the North African nation's decade-long conflict. In less than a year, she managed to help rival sides reach military agreements, stabilize a ceasefire and pave the way for elections. CGTN's Adel Al-Mahraoui takes a closer look at her achievements in Libya.
In March 2020, and after numerous failures to achieve a breakthrough in the Libyan conflict, UN Special Envoy to Libya Ghassan Salameh resigned. That temporarily promoted U.S. diplomat Stephanie Williams as the UN's acting special representative for Libya. Since then, major progress has been seen in the Libyan crisis.
Stephanie has made great achievements compared to her predecessor Ghassan, who nearly had made no progress. Stephanie utilized her diplomatic connections and experience in the region to bring Libyans closer to unity. There have been some mistakes in selecting representatives, but overall, she has completed nearly 60% of reaching a comprehensive solution.
Her 24 years of diplomatic experience were mostly spent in the Arab world. She served at U.S. embassies and missions spanning Libya, Iraq, Jordan, and Bahrain. At the State Department, she covered the Levant and the Maghreb. Williams diversified meeting locations to please all Libyan factions, but she did come at a time when regional and international players in Libya's proxy war had already begun to form agreements.
The international agreement has a role in helping Stephanie, especially to accept Sa'd and Al Jufra as the dividing line for the military conflict. Still on the ground, she played a major role, which we cannot undermine. Her performance was very well overall.
By the time Williams took over the Libyan file, she had already formed a plan, which she has more or less completed. All that remains for the new envoy is to implement what she has reached. She managed to revive the U.S. role in Libya and has paved the road for Biden's administration to have a say in this conflict.
During her 10 months as acting special representative to the UN Secretary General, Libyans have agreed on a ceasefire, to hold a constitution referendum, evacuate foreign fighters, and open domestic travel. By the time Jan Kubish, the new UN Special Representative, takes over in February, Libyans should have also nominated their candidates to lead the next interim executive authority.
With the new UN envoy taking over, some Libyans might want to take an advantage of that and renegotiate some terms, in hopes of reaching new terms with the new envoy, which could be more in their favor.
Williams' future role in the UN support mission in Libya has not been officially announced yet. Experts believe her continuation in any position could help in avoiding future setbacks in the talks. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Here in Kenya, the Kitui County government has started a project to make footballs. The project hopes to meet increasing local demand for a product that is mainly imported. CGTN's Nick Mudimba has that story.
The project will see the county in Kenya's eastern region take on competitors, including global giants. The county government of Kitui has started a journey that will see many young people from the region benefit by getting expertise in making these soccer balls. The factory will also produce volleyballs and handballs. Geoffrey Kitodia says he used to work at Adidas in the 1980s and is happy to be back home to make a difference.
Nilikutana na governor pale inaitwa Tulia.
I met the governor and told her I can make soccer balls, and because she's into empowering the young people, she told me to come and start this training. Many of them here can now make soccer balls from scratch.
At the ball-making facility, every worker has an assigned role. Every 2 hours, a soccer ball is made. The processes here are manual.
The quality of our soccer balls is similar to that of imported soccer balls. Ours follow strict procedures to give it the required standard weight, the leather is good and is cut well by machines.
Most local clubs, schools, colleges and other entities use imported balls, a gap the county administration wants to plug in order to create more jobs here. Making of these soccer balls is actually very beneficial to this community, the youth in this county, and of course the country. For the first time now, many will be able to actually use soccer balls made in their own home turf rather than importing soccer balls from other countries across the world. This is indeed one step to make sure they depend on themselves. Nick Mudimba, CGTN, Kitui County, Kenya.
Your business news up next. Coming up, Nigeria's Monetary Policy Committee keeps interest rates at 11.5% to boost spending. And South Africa banks on a $79 million fund to breathe life into its tourism sector.
Taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 14 hours of rain.
It is the World Economic Forum's Davos Agenda Week, and European leaders are calling for cooperation among countries and between the private and public sectors to overcome the coronavirus pandemic. Also, during the sessions, the International Monetary Fund is saying it's now more upbeat about the global economic outlook. Here's Giles Gibson with more.
The snowy streets of Davos are deserted this year. The coronavirus pandemic forcing this annual gathering of the global great and good online instead.
Ja, danke schön, Herr Professor Schwab.
In her address to the now virtual World Economic Forum, German Chancellor Angela Merkel called for global cooperation to defeat the virus.
Und das ist natürlich ein Punkt, der uns in den letzten Jahren immer wieder.
It has become even clearer to me than it was before that we need to choose a multilateral approach, that a self-isolating approach won't solve our problems. We see that first of all in the question of vaccination, since it is the route out of the pandemic.
Nicht dabei helfen wird, die Probleme zu lösen.
The President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, is already looking beyond this pandemic. The EU is proposing a bio-defence preparedness programme, with private companies and governments working together to identify and respond to new health threats.
It is only by working together across borders and across sectors that we can tackle our global challenges. No private company or public authority can do it alone. And this is why I believe this new form of blended partnership should prepare and protect us against the next big risk.
Meanwhile, the International Monetary Fund says it's more optimistic about the immediate future in its latest World Economic Outlook forecast. The IMF now expects the global economy to grow by 5.5% this year, a small but significant increase from its last forecast in October. China's economy is predicted to grow by more than 8% in 2021. And the IMF has bumped up its forecast for the US economy to 5.1% growth. But as ever, there was a note of caution running under it all.
The IMF's chief economist says the world is now in a race between vaccines and a mutating virus, with new variants forcing countries like the US to bring back travel restrictions, even as leaders call for unity and cooperation. Giles Gibson for CGTN in Washington.
To Nigeria now, the country's Monetary Policy Committee has voted unanimously to retain the interest rate at 11.5%. The central bank hopes this will boost consumer spending and help speed up the recovery process for the economy. Holding the rate will also encourage borrowing, as the lending rate by banks will now remain low. Nigerian inflation is above target and at the highest level seen in 3 years. A sharp drop in oil prices, the country's main export, and lockdowns at the start of the COVID-19 outbreak pushed the economy into recession. While still in Nigeria, messaging app WhatsApp is facing a serious dilemma over the introduction of its new privacy policy. It's led to backlash from its users, with some even migrating to other messaging platforms. And the situation has forced WhatsApp to shift the deadline for when users are required to accept the policy from February to May. Even so, most users still fear the new policy will invade their privacy. And as Deji Badmus reports, those concerns are no different in Nigeria.
Journalist Onya Dekunle has been using the WhatsApp messaging app for about 10 years now. She's grown so attached to the app, using it for normal messaging and for her job as well. But she says the new privacy policy is making her take a second look at the app as a primary messaging platform.
When I downloaded WhatsApp in the first place, I was made to understand that all my messages are end-to-end encrypted. Meaning that basically or literally what happens on WhatsApp stays on WhatsApp.
And she's not the only one.
What this new policy means is that WhatsApp will be able to share your metadata. They'll be able to share your course location. Your business owners who you chat with will be able to know more about you. So I think it's quite intrusive. If this policy comes to play finally, such apps would gain full access to our information, which I think it's really not good.
WhatsApp has sought to play down on any potential risk of the new privacy policy, but not many have been convinced. Quite a number of users have migrated to rival messaging apps. Folashade says she has not arrived at that point yet, but would not hesitate to do so if WhatsApp does not provide a more convincing explanation.
I'm still on WhatsApp because definitely it's the largest messaging platform. But if I feel that a certain app would be too intrusive, I think I'll need to check out other options.
One of the problems with the design of most apps' privacy policy document is that it is usually very lengthy and curated in a legal language that most users find difficult to fully understand and so don't bother to read them at all. Onyi says that's exactly what happened to her when she received the WhatsApp new privacy policy.
You usually don't have time to sit down and start reading, okay, what are they saying here? What? So because I needed to do something on my phone at that time, I had just accepted some kind of privacy policy on my phone. So right now, I do not even know if it's this one that everybody's complaining about that I accepted. So that's what concerns me, that's what worries me right now.
ICT expert Rashido Gunfalajo says the lengthy and sometimes complex nature of privacy policy documents by developers is most times deliberately designed to be so.
So they craft this in such a way that users will be shoehorned into accepting what is beneficial to those companies and not necessarily beneficial for the users. Knowing that we are not going to look at it, users are not going to read, define, like nobody has that time. Everybody is always in a rush. You want to just get to where you want to get to.
If WhatsApp was banking on that to push through its new privacy policy, then it appears it is not completely succeeding. And that's why the issue is now one big talking point across the world. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
The South African government has started a $79.4 million fund aimed at reviving its tourism industry. The Tourism Equity Fund will be used in particular to support black entrepreneurs start businesses and projects in the sector. The focus on black-owned businesses is part of the government's efforts to improve economic opportunities to those discriminated against during apartheid. The cash will come from government, lenders and the Pretoria-based Small Enterprise Finance Agency. Tourism-dependent businesses have been particularly hard hit during the COVID-19 pandemic as border closures and travel restrictions strangled some businesses. And to logistics now, where soaring shipping costs due to pandemic disruptions have become a big problem for UK retailers selling Chinese goods. CGTN's Jemima Walker has the details.
Made in China is a commonplace label on goods in Europe. And that means they have to be shipped from China, which with skyrocketing prices is becoming almost impossible for some companies.
About 60 to 70% of all toys are made in China.
The Entertainer is Britain's biggest independent toy retailer. It has 172 shops in the UK and 40 in Spain. Even a company this size simply cannot absorb the higher costs. It means they will inevitably be passed on to the consumer.
One of our very large teddy bears that retails for £40 would probably end up, because of the new freight rate, nearly double. So we're going to have to just discontinue very large items that have a very large cube. So it will have an impact on, one, the range, and it will have an impact on our retail pricing.
Pre-pandemic, it cost around $2,000 to ship a container from China to Europe. Now, European lockdowns are causing congestion at ports, so containers can't be returned quickly enough. Rising demand for Chinese goods means there's now a container shortage, pushing prices up to around $14,000. Edge Worldwide Logistics is a UK freight forwarder.
Ultimately, we've got to a point now where lots of people are stopping shipping products. So now it's completely flipped round and you're seeing a huge backlog of orders building up in Chinese warehouses. It's not just China, it's Southeast Asia as well, but in Chinese warehouse particularly, because people said, well, I can't afford to pay an extra $10,000. It's more than the margin I've got to move these goods.
In the UK, companies are facing added pressures relating to Brexit.
If Brexit works out fine and there are no major congestions in the ports, everything will work as normal. If Brexit turns into causing port congestions in major ports in the UK, as a major container line, the backup plan would be, well, just skip the UK port. It will then create problems for the UK importers and exporters. But from a major container liner perspective, the UK is just one small piece of the larger picture.
While some companies might look to get around the increased shipping costs by sourcing products closer to home, for most that's an unrealistic prospect.
In the end, China is the largest supplier of toys to the world. They're capable of the very high volumes. They're capable of consistently very high quality, which is really important for toy safety standards. It's a country that understands the toy market well.
It's hoped that Chinese New Year in February, when there's a lull in factory production, will see shipping prices fall. But there will still be a long way to go for equilibrium to be restored. Jemima Walker, CGTN, London.
And to Thailand now, a restaurant at a Thai hospital has begun serving food dishes that contain small amounts of cannabis after the country removed the plant from its narcotics list just last month. As the first Southeast Asian country to legalize medical marijuana in 2018, Thailand has become eager to capitalize on the multi-billion-dollar industry. CGTN's Dusita Sakyo reports.
Crowds of people eagerly waiting to be seated. It's a rare sight in the age of the coronavirus. At first glance, it is like many other restaurants. But reading the menu, happy dancing salad, giggling bread, the names are contradiction of the times, perhaps bringing customers respite from the emotional toll of living in a pandemic. And once the meal is over, the giggling bread literally delivers as advertised. This is Thailand's first cannabis cafe. Since the star ingredient was added to their menu in early January, they have seen customers increase by 70%.
We want to bring back the culinary traditions of our ancestors who used cannabis in cooking. We try to modernize and adapt recipes to make the food more enjoyable. For some people, it helps with their sleep.
The dishes offered at this restaurant were made possible by changes in the country's drug classification system, which delisted cannabis as a narcotic, allowing state-authorized firms to cultivate the plant. And just next door, the controversial plants are growing at a hospital known as a pioneer in Thailand for studying marijuana and its ability to relieve pain and fatigue. And now begins its transition to the culinary world.
The challenge in cooking with cannabis is controlling the concentration of THC, which is the chemical responsible for the psychoactive effects. But in this kitchen, one leaf here contains around 0.1% THC with a limit of 5 leaves per customer. It is perhaps not enough to get you high, but the chefs here say it's enough to feel its euphoric effects.
Thailand's relationship with cannabis is one of highs and lows. Known for some of the harshest drug laws in the world, Thailand once issued severe penalties for marijuana users. But all that is changing with astounding speed. Thailand has plowed ahead, eager to capitalize on a multi-billion-dollar industry estimated to be worth more than $500 million by 2024.
We have to think about making use of cannabis not only for medicine, because the market of medicine is quite small. We have to think about the other segment like food and tourism as well.
There's no doubt the depressing state of the economy could do with a boost in tourism. But for now, Thais can munch on these happy meals, each bite a reminder of Thailand's culinary past, a reflection of the country's major strides in cannabis acceptance. Dusita Saokao, CGTN, Prachinburi, Thailand.
Time for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. A South African doll designer keeps her business going despite tough economic times. Despite COVID-19 restrictions and travel bans, South African singer and doll designer Yolanda Yawa has worked hard to keep her doll company going. Luvutando dolls, it means feel the love. The designer says her African dolls are aimed at being fun, educational and inspiring. Reynolds.com reports.
Singer and doll designer Yolanda Yawa says she never had dolls as a young child and remembers being teased about the color of her skin.
I had some insecurities when I was young because I think I was a tone darker, and some of my family members, they used to tease me mostly about my skin tone, and they used to call me Nomnyamazane Gadini, which means the darkest one in the garden. I used to cry, when I've been called that.
Yolanda said she decided to make the Luvutando dolls to empower the black girl child to feel comfortable in her own skin and to inspire children of all races to learn about cultural diversity in South Africa.
I hope that the dolls can first and foremost be entertaining to young girls, and that they can assist them in helping them with their identity and how they can accept their uniqueness. A typical Louis Vuitton doll has big afro hair, and normally the eyes are darker, and you will see it has custom-made accessories or handmade accessories, and this dress specifically is inspired by the Xhosa tribe, so they're very flamboyant and sophisticated, and also they would have like a bracelet and all of that, and some shoes.
Although her business was impacted by COVID-19, Yolanda says it was a blessing in disguise. More kids at home during lockdown saw the sales of her dolls go up.
To go with the times and, to just say this is our new normal. We're introducing dolls now with masks. You can buy the masks separately for the dolls, or you can get the dolls with the masks. And the ones that come with the mask, as you can see, like we try to match the print with the print of the dress as well. So the doll still remains stylish because that's very important to us.
Yolanda wants to see Louis Vuitton dolls become the top doll brand in Africa and someday compete with the best in the world. Renee Dalcom, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
Algerians are embracing the Chinese language with private universities, including Chinese, in their programs. The Higher Institute of Sciences held a study day attended by those who wish to explore Chinese culture and language. Attendees took part in a workshop of Chinese calligraphy and writing. It was an opportunity that allowed them to train in the language too. Now, linguistic diversity is widespread among Algerians by virtue of their upbringing with the Arabic language and their proximity to Europe. This has made Algerians linguistically rich, thus paving the way to acquire yet another language.
As you can see now, the Algerian society is very interactive with the world languages and cultures, and with the Chinese language in particular in recent years. And we as a university will accompany this interest to reach its farthest limits in the field of creativity, scientific invention and knowledge production in this era.
China is a global power and the #1 economic partner for Algeria. It is time for Algerian youth to seize the opportunity and learn the Chinese language with all the beauty, science and culture that this language has.
Well, for Chinese language, first of all, I can tell you that I'm so into languages. Like for now, I speak 5 languages, and I'm willing to have Chinese language as my 6th language. And I think as a businesswoman also, I think that Chinese is going to help me to develop more and have more contacts and relationships with other countries. Like knowing Chinese is going to help me to talk to half of the population on the planet, you see?
And coming up in your sports news. Athletes across the globe already receiving vaccinations in preparation for the Olympic Games.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Right, let's start your sports news with the Olympic Games, where some athletes have already been vaccinated against COVID-19. This according to the International Paralympic Committee spokesperson Craig Spence, who added there will be a release of new guidelines set to affirm confidence in the Tokyo Games organizers, with a recent poll suggesting around 80% of people in Japan not wanting the Games to be held. Organizers are battling to prove they can hold the Games safely in Tokyo. More Paralympians are likely to be vaccinated soon, as they may fall within the vulnerable categories. However, many athletes and national bodies have stressed they do not want to jump the queue ahead of other vulnerable citizens. More than 15,000 competitors are expected at the Games, which were postponed from last year due to the pandemic.
We've got a plan for the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is that no athlete in the world attending the Games is vaccinated ahead of the Games. If we can build a plan that delivers the Games with that parameter, then we're in a much stronger position if, say, half the population who come to the Games has been vaccinated.
Meanwhile, the Tokyo Games will top the agenda when the International Olympic Committee's Executive Board meets on Wednesday. With the board firmly backing the event, any talk of scrapping it altogether due to COVID-19 is highly unlikely. With less than 6 months to go until the troubled games are due to start, the board will instead tackle questions over the vaccination of athletes, international visitors and safety regulations, among other issues. The Olympic body nevertheless finds itself in a similar situation to March last year, when it was forced to postpone the Games by 12 months as the COVID-19 pandemic shut down sport worldwide.